So let's get into more of the fun stuff, mining news. Here's a weird one coming from Aslan, OX_Aslan, referencing both Vertcoin and Digibyte coin. Both of these cryptocurrencies have been around for a very long time. I believe Vertcoin's definitely like a 2017 coin, 2016 coin. Digibyte's like a 2014 coin. Just a little bit of history on Digibyte. Digibyte was around at a time when ASIC resistance was just approached differently. So back in the day, before, Bitcoin ASICs were really on the rise, or right as Bitcoin ASICs were on the rise, there were a lot of people discussing, how to prevent ASICs from getting onto the network. And Digibyte was, I think a little bit before Ethereum, but was kind of pushing towards that. And the way they decided to approach it, and was actually the way that Raven coin adopted too, but in a different manner. But the way that it was originally approached was, we will have multiple algorithms. So what Digibyte did was they had 5 algorithms that you could essentially mine, including SHA-256 still, but it evened it out, right? So basically, yes, ASICs were allowed on the network by nature of being able to mine with SHA-256 or script or whatever it may be, but they were weighted algorithms. So they would weight the 5 algorithms against each other. So you would have your Skeen and a few others. Let's see. So I have the history pulled up here so we can get the actual 5 for you guys. So SHA-256, script, Qubit, Myriad, and then Skyn or Skeen, however you want to pronounce it. I forget at this point. So you had these 5 algorithms, and they were weighted for their ability to find a block, meaning that if you had were utilizing an algorithm that was primarily GPU, you could still compete with the ASIC miners that were on the SHA-256 side of things. And this meant obviously better decentralization because multiple forms of hardware could mine on it. So it wasn't ASIC resistant, but it was essentially 51% attack proof by nature of weighting these algorithms against each other and allowing multiple forms of hardware to mine the cryptocurrency. And this is all important because this has to do directly with the algorithm. Now, eventually what happened is that we had Ethereum come out, and Ethereum's approach to mining was to go completely ASIC resistant. And the way this was done on Ethereum is that we saw essentially something that was called like memory hardening, or basically utilizing the memory on the GPU in particular and filling it up so that if you went to go build an application-specific integrated circuit for that algorithm, you would still have the cost of adding all the memory modules per ASIC unit. So to give you guys an idea, that means that you increase the cost significantly to build an ASIC, because now you have to have additional PCB space, you have to have the memory modules, and you have to lay that out per ASIC chip for that algorithm. Now, eventually, as we know, ETH ASICs did come along, but GPUs were sort of competitive, but that was the way that they took. And then, just to give you guys like a full history, you had something called Raven coin that came out with X16 VR. And X16 was essentially 16 different algorithms that were rotated within the same algorithm. So within the same mining process. So as opposed to having multiple algorithms, right, that were weighted and you mine just that one algorithm and then you're paid out based off that, this one would rotate the algorithms. So you couldn't build an ASIC for any one specific algorithm because it might mine it for a minute, and then based off of the final hash, it would take a certain portion of that, and that would determine randomly the next algorithm that it would switch to, and that made it impossible for the prediction to happen for the ASICs to say, oh, kick over this, kick over that, kick over this. And that is how ASIC resistance worked early on with Raven coin. And then eventually what ended up coming out was like ProgPow. with Oh God, a Girl and a few others, the LOL miner dev. All those guys worked on that. A lot of different people did. And that was essentially getting to the point of utilizing the entire GPU to mine. There is like specific instruction sets that prevent the ASICs, but to make it as simple as possible, utilizing as much of the GPU as possible so that you would have to mimic an entire GPU to mine. I think that's the best way I can explain ProgPow without getting into the specific reasoning for like each instruction set, which I have covered in detail on the channel before. So if you're interested in that, of course, look those videos up. So all of that to say, we also at one point had Vertcoin, which was VertHash, and VertHash was a low power ASIC resistant mining algorithm. It still has no ASICs on it. Potentially there's an argument that ASICs could be put on it, of course, but you would have to have the financial incentive for that to happen, which of course right now there is not one. I'd have to look into it more as to how viable that would be if Vertcoin took off. But as it sits right now, it's a low power ASIC resistant mining algorithm, really advertised as being able to mine while game. And that is the big thing behind it, is you could run the VertHash cryptocurrency miner on your gaming PC and still play video games without a massive performance impact on your video game. Of course, this is the way it does this is through, once again, loading up the memory. The problem is now, of course, this is less and less viable, at least in my recent testing with VertHash, due to the fact that we have 4K textures and a lot of effects and stuff happening on the GPU that are loading up the VRAM. And to compound that issue, modern GPUs are not getting the subsequent increase in memory capacity on a generational level that they have in the past. And so you're ending up with more performance impact, or at least having to turn more visuals down to maintain the performance in the game while mining VertHash. So I don't know that their selling point is as viable as it has been in the past, except for the big thing, which is that the DAG is at 1.9 gigabytes, meaning you can still mine on 2 gigabyte GPUs. But like, let's say you have an 8 gigabyte GPU trying to play a modern game, you're going to frequently utilize more than that. Thereby, of course, if you are trying to mine VertHash, you will be impacting, of course, your performance in that game. I hope you enjoyed this clip from the Crypto Mining Show. If you would like to see more from this particular episode, take a look up here. Don't forget to also subscribe to the channel. And if you want to support me directly, you can go to sonofatech.locals.com and become a member. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next Tuesday.